Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Buckner coming at you. I hope everybody's keeping nice and safe and sound, and that your papers are going okay. Remember, no more than for your paper, don't have it more than at least 5 pages, no more than 10 pages, double spaced. Okay. You don't have to use all of your 10 citations. Just make sure you use at least 6 of them, and you have them listed in your source in your works cited. Okay. Those are some of the questions I've gotten. So I hope everybody's okay with that. I think it's due today by 5 o'clock, and then I'll read through them and we'll get going on this, okay? Don't forget your other homework is up on Blackboard too to do anytime. If you haven't done some of the homework, don't be afraid to do it. You still got until the Sunday midnight to hand those in. That Sunday midnight before finals week. I can't exactly think it's like the last week of April or something like that. To hand some of those in for some credit. Okay, the later you are, the more points you'll have taken off. Okay, so I hope everybody's paying attention to this coronavirus. The numbers are getting up there. I don't know if the United States is bending its curve yet or not. It's too early. Remember, we need to let science do its thing, and we will hopefully someday find a virus, but we still got to go find a vaccine for this, but we still need to go through the rigmaroles of science to test things out, to do it properly. And I think we're going to be okay, but the best way to do this is just to stay in, guys. Just, quit going out. And unfortunately, we got to bring the economy to a screeching halt here and try to distance ourselves from each other, because this thing, I see new reports about how it spreads, and it spreads. It's looking like it hangs in what's called aerosols, so we can spread this a little bit easier than we thought. So just stay safe, everybody, and do the proper things and listen to the experts. That Dr. Fucci that talks, he seems to know what he's doing. I saw him this morning on some of the news shows, and he really was doing a good job of expressing how this stuff works. It's not up to us. It's up to the virus and up to our intelligence, but we got to use our intelligence when we fight this thing. Okay. So let science dictate the numbers to us, and let our ethics drive our policies, please, in my humble opinion. Also in the markets, have you seen the oil, man? It collapsed like almost $19 a barrel, and now it's back up to about $25 a barrel, with hopes that Russia and Saudi Arabia and America are going to cut their production, because we're going to have a glut not only of supply, increasing supply, but we're going to have a accelerating decreasing demand, and that demand is already decelerating. So we're going to have an oversupply of oil, and it's going to crush the prices even further down. And believe it or not, they're getting together. I guess the big CEOs are getting together to talk to Trump today about what they're going to do. So we'll find out what they're planning later on. I think they meet at 3 o'clock. And then Saudi Arabia and Russia need to decide whether or not they're going to cut production. But one way of not having to cut your production, just to take over the market and increase your market share. So who knows what's going to happen in this oil market. I'm just glad I don't play it. I watch it a lot, but I don't put money in it because it is so volatile. I mean, it's crazy. They're actually going to be talking about colluding. They're going to talk about how they can fix the price of oil. That's what they're going to be talking about today. Whether or not they should decrease their supply, put a tariff on it, or what we're going to do. Because at these current, even at $20, oh boy, the frackers, the United States oil industry is going to get crushed. Saudi Arabia and Russia can keep on doing it if they wanted to, because they got plenty left. We don't have too much left, and it takes a lot of money to get that. It takes a lot of money to get that energy out. So we'll see what happens. Just hang on to your hats and watch it. It should be very interesting. But my solution is just to get off of foreign oil. Just get off of oil we suck out of the ground, I should say. All right? Because we've got to get off our American oil too. And oil, in a sense, is just algae. That's it. It is exactly what it is. It's millions of years old algae that got into this nice little puddle underneath the ground for us, and we just stuck a straw down there and sucked it out, and we got 55 years of hard labor in a barrel of oil. It's just amazing that we're able to collect it. But we can grow this stuff, right? It's just that we need to be innovative in how we grow it, and we have to understand the laws of physics. And it takes a while for that algae to grow and for us to squeeze it out and get that oil so we can use it. All right. And plus, we need to understand that it hasn't been fermented as long in the earth and stuff like that. All right. But we can, if we do the proper mathematics, realize that we can grow enough algae to drive all of our cars, all of our planes, if we wanted to. And that will be what's called a carbon neutral um, situation, which we'll talk about in the PowerPoint slides here in a little bit. All right, but algae, I think, is probably the best what's called biofuel to run our cars on. All right, because we can pick which strain of algae out there, which one is the best, the different carbon chains, which one is the best for run our trucks, fly our planes, and run our cars. All right, and I like this scenario right here. I like the setup. All right, because what they actually do at the very end, you'll see they're right next to a coal fire plant, electrical plant, and they take that CO2 from the coal fire plant and inject it into the water, and the algae eats the carbon, and that's what it uses to build itself. Right, so it brings down the carbon dioxide released from the coal fire plant while giving us another fuel to put back in. And what they do is do what's called cogeneration. They squeeze out that oil out of that algae, and then they take over that leftover biomass, and they could take it and actually burn it in that coal fire plant with the coal and do like a 60-40 blend. All right, and if they have any algae left over too, they can also sell it on the open market because it is a superfood. All right, you can go to your GNC, eat that stuff up, man, and you'll be like lifting weights like no tomorrow. Okay, so let's watch my humble opinion. What is the best biofuel to run our cars with?
You know when you're minding your own business, swimming in a lake or ocean, and suddenly that green blob touches you, you're not down. That stuff could power your house, your car, and it could even stop global warming. Hey there, muckrakers. Thanks for watching D-News. I'm Trace. Algae is plural. It encompasses a large number of stemless, rootless, leafless, usually monocellular plants that get energy from photosynthesis. Algae exist in many colors: red, yellow, purple, brown, black, and of course green and blue-green. All of these absorb light and turn it into energy. Algae are a basic food source for both salt and freshwater animals and birds. Their decomposition releases minerals into the water, and their mass provides a refuge for small fish and invertebrates. If nature loves it so much, why don't humans?
It's a completely renewable source, and it's made from sunlight and carbon dioxide and water, and so it's a very sustainable renewable fuel.
That's Dave Hazelbeck, founder of Global Algae Innovations. He thinks these tiny plants can be way more valuable than they are already. Steve Woods is a mechanical engineer, and he works with Dave turning algae into fuel for cars, trucks, and airplanes.
The ones that we deal with are microalgae, so it's a little single cell, and you could start with just a single cell and grow it all the way out and just have it multiply and everything. Just growing plants, you just
Exponential growth algae is,
carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen,
right?
and stuff, and
Just like that bacteria in that cell
that's a bad thing.
that the guy talked about in the first video you watched.
Eventually, it'll fill up these pools.
That's how algae grows,
and Steve
exponentially,
will pull them out, drain the water, and dry it all out.
till its carrying
That's
capacity.
actually really hard, by the way. The dry algae can be turned into food for animals or people. But
and when you do feed them certain things or stress them in certain ways, they can produce oils and different things that are beneficial for nutraceuticals or pharmaceutical stuff and everything. So it's kind of cool.
There are over 100,000 different types of algae, and they store energy
100,000.
of oil.
So we can pick what algae we want.
Easily converted into drop-in fuels, which means it can be converted into gasoline, diesel, and jet that can be used directly in current engines. You don't need any special modifications or anything to run an algae biofuel. the
You can
fuel
just
that we're
put it in a car,
producing
start running
is
them.
exactly the
That's
same
it. It's the
in terms
same
of
thing.
performance as gasoline or diesel or jet. Renewable diesel actually performs better than petroleum-based diesels.
Biofuels like these are energy sources that come from living matter. They stand apart from fossil fuels, which, by the way, also come from living matter, because biofuels are made now, not over millions of years. You've probably heard of ethanol, a fuel made from corn. It's easy to make with the industry we already have, but it's not the best biofuel.
It takes a lot of time to grow a whole field of corn, but to grow out a lot of algae is a lot faster, and it's just a plant.
On top of that, the U.S. Department of Energy believes algae could be 10 or 100 times more productive than other bioenergies. Biofuels aren't new. Henry Ford's Model T was designed to run on ethanol, but ethanol only packs about half the punch of gasoline.
Hemp seed
As people
ethanol.
recognize the issues with global warming and climate change, biofuel technology has only gotten better. Fossil fuels release carbon that was trapped inside of our planet for millions of years, but because biofuels are plants,
You're capturing the carbon dioxide, and so it's not being released, and that's part of it. You can grow algae, 40 times more algae per acre than you can with terrestrial crops. And as a result, you don't have all the deforestation.
On top of that, these biofuel farmers only need the oil. The algae can be used for industrial applications in food and in drugs. The algae even contains omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids that are required for healthy humans, but difficult to find in the food chain. Algae are pretty incredible little organisms, but this process isn't perfect yet. In the past, because it's been very difficult to remove algae from the water, biofuel has been very expensive, though, according to Dave, they are now down to only $2 or $3 a gallon to make it, though they still can't make enough to compete with larger petrogas companies. Hopefully, someday in the future, algae raceways like these could replace oil fields and gas stations will just pump out biofuel. Algae could also stop global warming in its tracks. Seeker Stories got to actually go to this plant in Hawaii where the biofuel
This is why I
is
like
made,
this setup.
and they
Okay,
learned
it's
how carbon
cogeneration,
plus power plants
and it's a
global
way
warming
to
for Earth
sequester
offsets
the
their
carbon in a
footprint.
sense,
Check it out here.
And this is next to a power plant. It's unique
instead of
because
putting it down on
you
the
have
ground like
access
we've
to
seen
capture
before.
carbon dioxide and avoid that discharge and reuse it, and that prevents it from going into the atmosphere and causing global warming.
Would you put algae in your tank? How about in your mouth? I mean, it is a food source after all. Let us know in the comments. Make sure you
Go out and get yourself some algae as a GNC. It is a superfood. That's what I hear. Okay. But algae definitely is the I can't do two things at one time. Algae definitely is the solution, in my humble opinion. And you saw how they did those in the raceways. Okay, that was out in Hawaii. So these hippies out there growing this algae in these raceways are, in a perfect biome and climate to do that in the outdoors. But unfortunately, we need to centralize this and have a lot of micro farms, so we can compete and produce enough. And some of the new designs are just in little vertical um, fish tanks, basically. These little tubes, the algae is just running through here and growing and getting hit by the light. So you got a lot what's called surface mass striking the the surface and allowing the algae to absorb the um, do the photosynthesis thing. Okay. See, in those raceways, we only have one top layer. That's it. All right. And the light can only penetrate about 6 inches for that algae to be able to grow. Here we have a lot more surface area. So we cut our demand for the area almost, by 75%. Okay. We're being a lot more utilized. And you can see this is also in a greenhouse. So it doesn't matter. We just got to look at the light generation from the sun. So we place it where we're getting enough light during the day and keep it in a warm atmosphere and make sure that the temperature is okay. The algae should grow. So we can do this in the middle of the desert in Utah, or we can do this in Hawaii in raceways, or even in little fish tanks. We also have these little outdoor ones. They're like the little. We used to have one like this in Robert Morris. We had a design just like this. We took it down though because it was a little bit too hard to clean. We just, after a couple of years, we got getting in. We only had like 2 tubes, so it wasn't like we were producing anything mass. All right. But you can see all these different designs they have of being able to grow this algae. All right. So we can pick out which algae we want, specialize it whether for the plane, for the train, or for the automobile, and go to town. All right. And it's a carbon neutral thing to begin with, and we'll talk about what that means here in a little bit. Um, but algae is my my biggest hope, I should say. I think that's what we're really going to do. All right. Now, what did just happen there?
It's the most
Okay.
plentiful.
But in the solutions project, they say that they want to do what's called a hydrogen economy, right? And I love the hydrogen idea, right? And hydrogen, got to remember, is still, when we're driving our vehicles, there's two different ways to do it. And when we can do combustion, and we can heat up that piston and turn those turbines, and we can ride them on electrical motors. And the hydrogen economy is basically based on an electrical motor. All right, so we take that hydrogen and we run it through what's called a fuel cell. That makes electricity and then turns our wheels. Okay, and the advantageous thing about this is that we can refuel our tanks with the hydrogen just like we can refuel our tanks with the gasoline. So it doesn't take 3 hours for my car to recharge the batteries. The electricity is on demand. All right. But to create a new infrastructure of changing how we get cars to get our hydrogen in instead of gasoline, which would be the algae, we can just put that immediately into our cars. Same kind of piping, same kind of infrastructure, okay, so we don't have to change everything. But with hydrogen, we would have to change a lot, all right? So you can see how big of a barrier of entry that would be. All right, but it makes sense because hydrogen is, an element of matter. It will never be created or destroyed. It'll just keep on getting recycled through. All right. The trouble is, when we get it, we have to do what's called electrolysis and electrify that water to separate the hydrogen from the oxygen molecules. All right, and depending on how that electricity is made, if it's made via coal, that's no good, right? We're not doing any good. So let's see about this hydrogen economy and the cars that might
Stuff
happen
in
from
the
it.
universe. Hey guys, here I am, CES 2015. I'm at the Toyota press conference and my mind has been blown once again by fuel cell vehicle technology. Now, you remember I was crazy about this stuff a year ago. I'm still crazy now. I know Toyota is our sponsor, but I love this technology. I'd be talking about this no matter what, because this is what the future is all about. It is forward thinking. Now, some of us might not be familiar with how a fuel cell vehicle works. That's why I talked to Matt McClory, an engineer with Toyota, who is here today at CES.
Well, at a very high level, it's an electrochemical engine where you can directly convert energy into electricity, right? In this case, we use hydrogen as a fuel combined with oxygen from air, and we directly convert that in an electrochemical cell into electricity that allows us to drive the electric motor for the wheels.
All right, now correct me if I've got this wrong, but as I recall, when you combine hydrogen and oxygen, besides the generation of electricity, you end up with water.
Exactly. So the way the membrane works is that you get hydrogen from one side onto the fuel side, and that gets split up on the side of the membrane into a proton and an electron. But the membrane is an electron barrier, but a proton carrier. And so the proton can go through the membrane to the other side, but the electron has to take an external path. When it takes that external path, it goes through the traction motor. That allows you to drive the car. When the electron comes back the other side on the air side, it combines with the proton and the oxygen from air, and it makes water.
So that's it. You've got hydrogen on one side, oxygen on the other, and you end up with electricity and water vapor. No carbon emissions like gasoline or diesel-powered vehicles. That's pretty phenomenal. But that's not the biggest news of all. Toyota is going to share its intellectual property. It holds more than 5,000 patents worldwide on
This is the
fuel
key
cell
right here, the
technology.
sharing of the
Everything
technology,
from fuel
open
cell
source.
stacks to the way that hydrogen power stations can be built. And now they're sharing that information for free. Why? Well, I asked Craig Scott of Toyota that same question. He had an interesting answer.
Well, I mean, imagine you're changing everything, right, from soup to nuts, right? We're completely revolutionizing an entire energy system. From the car to the station to consumers' mindsets, all of these things need to be I don't say change, but they need to be altered, and we need to find ways to educate people. A big part of what today is about sharing what we've learned over the last 22 years of developing this technology, but also finding a way to come together and build new things.
While this may seem like a revolutionary idea to people, that something about sharing intellectual property, which often we view as being so important, that's the biggest revolution, I think.
Many of our careers have been spent on developing this car and this technology, and now we want to see what others can bring to it, and it's a great time to be part of the hydrogen world.
It's the sharing of this information that allows for collaboration as well as competition, and ultimately can bring about a hydrogen-based economy. Now, this is a big idea, and some pretty big thinkers have weighed in on it, including some right at the Toyota press conference. I
That's
gotta
my
show
boy
you a
right
couple
there.
of highlights.
We're talking about a game changer. Game changer that's going to change the landscape, not just of our lives, but perhaps the world of politics, the world of energy. And energy is at the very basis of all of modern society. What I'm saying today is we are present at the creation.
Today's announcements on our patents has less to do with hydrogen fuel cell cars than it does about the cultural growth of a hydrogen society. It's obvious that there can be a higher societal value in openly sharing our IP. We can speed the metabolism of everyone's research and development and move into a future of mobility quicker, more effectively, and more economically.
You're talking about changing a century-old paradigm with a brand new infrastructure, a hydrogen economy. We've been talking about it since 1970, and today may be the day we point back and say, that's when it really started. I can't think of anything more forward-thinking than that. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts. What do you think about fuel cells?
I can't
What do you
think anything more forward than that. Yeah, I love the hydrogen economy. I think that would be pretty neat to transfer this, but it's a huge step because we would have to really redesign a lot of different things. And to get that hydrogen too, got to remember we get that via electricity, and how we generate that electricity needs to be taken into consideration of the throughput calculation. All right, but definitely the hydrogen fuel cell cars are definitely a way to go. And it is not one silver bullet, right? So maybe we'll have a little bit of both. We have a little bit of algae, and then slowly but surely try to get our economy onto the hydrogen side of things, because I'm not averse to that. Those cars really would change how cars really perform as well. They're definitely more efficient. They're just a lot more costly to produce than a regular car is. So let's talk a little bit about renewable energies and the bioenergy and hydrogen cells, and then that will conclude our renewable energy section. Okay, so bioenergy is any energy derived from biomass. So any living plant or animal is considered bioenergy. I'll throw you on a fire and burn you to boil some water to make some steam to drive a turbine if it came down to it. All right, biomass consists of organic materials derived from living or recently living organisms. All right, and it contains chemical energy that originated from sunlight into photosynthesis. Okay, and oil was old bio energy, and it still really is bioenergy, but it's not derived from living or recently living organisms. It's derived from organisms that lived millions of years ago. So that's the big difference there. Okay, it's only a time frame that we're looking at. The energy source is basically the same. Plants turning sunlight into energy, chemical energy for us to be able to uptake. In principle, bioenergy is renewable, all right, and releases no net carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So in principle, if we do it right, and time it right, and take in consideration the ecological principles of Mother Nature of growing this stuff, of letting that carbon become into life forms, we can time it out properly, right? taking in consideration of carrying capacity and biomes and all that other rigmarole. Right? And a release is no net carbon dioxide because it's what's called carbon neutral. It is not releasing old carbon that was sequestered millions of years ago in the form of oil in the ground. It is using this current carbon and continuing the normal cycle, carbon cycle, all right? Because not all that carbon would be sequestered if those plants fell down, die. When those plants die, that carbon still gets released, all right? So they would die sometime, and maybe some of that would turn into coal as well. Okay, but that's just part of the natural cycle of the Earth. So it's all within inside that balance. So it's considered carbon neutral. All right. Depending on what crop you have, however, it can be considered carbon negative. All right, because some of that carbon can be sequestered into the soil and into the root formation of that plant. All right, so that depends on the plant, however. All right. So, but the worst form, it is actually carbon neutral. It's not adding to the release. Unless you go back and you look at the total throughput, if you're running that tractor for your organic farm, you're still releasing the carbon dioxide from that tractor. Okay. So we harness bioenergy from many types of plant matter, including wood, trees, charcoal, crop residue, as well as combustible animal for waste. Believe it or not, a lot of people do cook with cow dung, right? And it's just a great way to burn. It burns really good, all right? And we could use it for a couple different things. We can actually burn it for heating. All right, and some people might have heard of nice little Ben Franklin stove, very efficient. All right, and most of the world still use wood for heating their small little homes or manure. All right, we can also use it for generating electricity. Okay, so we do mostly with a 60-40 blend, 60% coal, 40% biomass crop residue. From areas. So if you're out in Iowa, you're using corn stalks. You're in West Virginia, using sawdust. So it depends on what area and agricultural byproducts you have. All right, so we can burn it and boil water to make some steam to turn a turbine. Okay. In rural regions of developing countries, however, people heavily depend on fuel wood to burn and heating homes. So our number one fuel use is still really wood. Believe it or not, people. That is a very high product that we use all the time. And a lot of that is used for heating or cooking in third world developing countries. Okay, and this can lead to that deforestation, soil erosion, desertification. The more people we have utilizing that resource, the story of the Lorax starts coming true, right? So we need to start equating how these developing countries, maybe it is better for them to use coal, right? I'd rather give them something else, though. In developing countries, sources of bioenergy are used to produce all this kind of stuff. I mean, they're still living the way we did, and that's all we lived on for how many millions of years? 100,000 years. So biopower is biomass used to generate electricity. So we take that biomass and we look and see how much energy we can get per kilowatt out of it, right? Waste products from logging, sawmills, pulp mills, all that stuff can be used as the source of this biopower. Okay, we take that biomass, we put it in there, and we burn it in an electrical plant, and then we see how much heat it gives off and how fast it will turn those generators for us. And we use that a lot with cogeneration with coal-fired plants. Okay. We can also gasify it and pyrolysis. We can do a whole bunch of different stuff. We can turn it into a liquid, all right, and fuel that can be used to burn to generate electricity. So we can do a whole bunch of different things with our biofuel. Most biofuels, though, are considered to be liquid fuels produced by biomass that power our automobiles. We don't use as much for burning. Most of it is being grown and used for locomotion. And we use ethanol as our primary product because that's close to our gasoline mix that we have. Okay, and it's just a fermenting process. It's just making alcohol. All right, that's all we're basically doing is we're just fermenting the biomass and pulling out the sugars that the plant had. Okay, whether that be cellulose ethanol, right, or a straight sugar ethanol from like a sugar cane or corn. All right, we're getting that sweetness out of that corn. All right, but we're getting the cellulose sugars out of that switchgrass. And you can see that it has been widely adopted. Back in the 80s, it was hardly any of it. Brazil was starting to get up there, all right? Because 1970s when we had the oil embargo and the first oil shock kind of thing that happened, all right? And Brazil got on a pace to they almost have almost all their cars. I think over 90% of their cars actually run on ethanol, all right? But you got to remember Brazil's biome. They have the perfect temperature and precipitation to grow sugarcane, and that's what it runs on. Here in the United States, we don't. All right, our biggest one is actually ethanol grown via corn. All right, 10% of your gasoline typically has ethanol, and that ethanol comes from the corn industry. Scientific estimates of the energy rate of investment on corn-based ethanol varies, but recent calculations place it about a 1 to 3 to 1 ratio. So you get 1 unit of energy is expanded to gain 1.3 units of energy of ethanol. So we're not getting too much back out of it. Okay, because you see here hydropower we get a ton back, right? But biodiesel hardly anything, right? Even the oil sands we're getting more energy out of it than our biodiesel. But our ethanol, right, made from some of the plants, and this really depends on the bioenergy we're deriving it from, right, to get this out to the biggest area. Okay, shale oil, you can see, still getting a little bit more out. So biodiesel is a fuel produced from vegetable oil used for cooking grease and animal fat, just recycled old fryer grease, right, and other derivatives of vegetable oils. And has many advantages. It has less vehicle emissions, nearly identical to the fuel economy. We can just put it right into our pipelines, put it into the cars, and we can start working. It's cost effective, non-toxic, biodegradable. If we had a big spill of this, it would just naturally go back into the system, not like the oil that we use today. And it can be sourced from food waste if we need it to be, right? Or we can grow it ourselves. It comes in so many different forms, right? There's plenty of distribution chains for this raw materials, okay? Many species of algae, like I said, probably is my favorite biofuel out there, are now being cultivated and produced to get our different things. So that we can get the biodiesel out of this, ethanol, and even jet fuel out of this. So we can pick what algae we want, which one has the right carbon chains, put it in that fish tank so we don't get any outside sources in a closed loop system. All right, because that open algae farm, that one in Hawaii, can get some strange algae if they can get some wind, can pick some stuff up and contaminate that field. All right, but if we keep it in the fish tanks and pick out the right strain we want in the closed loop system, it's amazing. All right, and it can be grown on large scales in outdoor ponds or even as closed tanks, like I said. Researchers are refining techniques to produce cellulose ethanol also, which is using the enzymes to produce the ethanol of the cellulose. So we can get the sugars out real easy out of the sugar cane, sugar beets, and sweet corn. Okay, but it's harder to get the sugars out of the cellulose of the plants, which is like the stalk and the leaves of the plants. But it's found in all plant material, and it really has no food value whatsoever. Okay, so if we could take that waste, and that's what we're trying to do, we're trying to make what's called cellulose ethanol out of it. Okay, and this can be taken out of native plants. We can pick out what plant grows the best and gives us the most cellulose body mass. So in principle, energy from biomass is carbon neutral. We're releasing no net carbon into the atmosphere. So when we're burning this biomass, it releases carbon dioxide, but it was already there. So it's just going back into the normal carbon cycle, and we plant a new crop, and the new crop will outtake that same amount of carbon and put it back into the ground. All right. if it's as big as it was before, right? So this only holds true if forests which sequester carbon dioxide are not cut to use as a source of biomass. So we need to remember the rate of biomass sequestration of each plant. So if we're cutting down those forests, they can sequester a lot more than a field that was made after we cut it down to plant switchgrass or corn or something like that. All right. So like I said, as an ecological economist, we got to look at the total throughput. What was that ecological service of that forest before, and what will be that ecological service afterwards, playing with a different kind of biome or kind of a plant makeup. Now, the second one, how we're going to drive our cars, is basically going to be electricity. And we're going to need some hydrogen to help us out with that. Even though I love the batteries, I love the Tesla car, and maybe the supercapacitor that can give us a faster charge on our batteries will come true someday. All right, but hydrogen seems to be a more advanced for when it comes to recharging our cars, all right, on a faster little clip, so we can go longer distances, not just 325 miles and wait 6 hours to get a recharge on our cars. So the biggest limitation to renewable energy is the difficulty of storing the energy in large quantities for use when needed. All right, so that is the biggest drawback. We can't really store the extra sunlight in batteries or the wind turbines in batteries. We need some kind of storage, and they say that hydrogen can be that storage. Okay, because hydrogen is just another component of hydrogen, and then once we get it, we can take that and then turn that in. We can burn it, or we can throw it to through a fuel cell to make that electricity for us. So maybe we can overcapacitate our electrical grid and try to be able to produce a little bit extra for the use of hydrogen. And that's kind of what the Solutions Project talks about, being able to produce this in a renewable energy fashion. The problem is that technology is not totally possible yet. Okay, but we're still working on it. We still need to work on it. All right. So fuel cells use hydrogen as a stored power source, and then it just runs through the fuel cell and gives us the electricity to run our cars with. All right, and then the oxygen is exhaled through the tail and turns into water. Okay. Hydrogen releases energy when it combines with the oxygen to produce water, and this produces no pollution. The transition from gasoline to hydrogen could alleviate dependence on foreign fuels, of course, and our dependence on fuels, oil, period. Many cities have begun converting a lot of the bus fleets to run on these hydrogen fuel cells, okay, because it's just making sense. But it depends on, maybe it makes sense economically because of the price of gasoline for the city. But now oil is $25 a barrel, and who knows where it's going to be just tomorrow. Okay, or I guess it's say Monday, after all these negotiations and secret talks take place. Okay, but it was getting there with the bigger bus companies because it's more compatible. They were actually producing their own little hydrogen components there at the base, and then putting it into the cars, and it was working. But who knows what's going to happen later on. And they use it to make electrolysis. That's all we're doing is making electricity in the car, and that is able for us to run our wheels. So converting a nation's infrastructure to hydrogen would require a massive and costly development of facilities. The barriers to entry of totally reorganizing our infrastructure is going to be immense, and that's what's really going to be a drawback. I don't think we should stop trying to do that kind of stuff, but in the interim, we're going to need something to run our cars on. I think algae right now is probably our best bet. Okay. The leakage of hydrogen could potentially deplete stratic ozones as well. So we got to be just as careful. I mean, everything has a positive and negative to it. So if we're having some hydrogen leaks, just like we have methane leaks for our natural gas, we could be having some problems in the greater atmosphere. Okay, so we got to remember the carrying capacity and what the natural balance is, and not let that natural balance get out of whack. Hydrogen has many benefits, though, as a fuel. All right, it's the most abundant element in the universe, so we will not run out. It is an element of matter. We cannot create it or destroy it. That is what the sun makes its sunlight out of. Okay, the hydrogen and helium, mashing those two things together, it's amazing. Okay, so if we can kind of capture this, we'll be definitely Star Wars kind of stuff, right? And Star Trek kind of stuff. We'll be out in the universe because we can find it everywhere. Using hydrogen to generate electricity generates no air pollution. Okay, so we can't burn it in a sense, but then we got to be able to create it. Okay, and to create it, we usually use electricity. So we need to know how we're creating that hydrogen, or getting to that hydrogen. Say we're not creating, we're just breaking it off the water molecule part. Fuel cells are very energy efficient too. They get about 35 to 70% of the energy released in reaction can be used. The combustion engine has always been around 25% use of energy, so we're never really getting there. But we can definitely increase it, and it's one of the most efficient fuels out there. So I kind of like it, and I would love to have a hydrogen economy. It definitely would be very neat. All right, so that's it for the renewable energy section. I think coming up is how we're going to build the cities of the future. I'm not too sure. I'll check the syllabus. We'll check the syllabus starting on Monday when I post that one. Post to the next section. Okay, so stay safe, everybody. Stay contained. Do that social distance thing. Watch the oil markets, and let's see if Trump can do his magical powers and get Putin in Saudi Arabia to cut 10 million barrels of production a day, so that we don't have to cut our production or something. I don't know what's going to happen. It's going to be interesting. Stay tuned. Bye.